Good morning and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Kat and I recently bought this super cute cookbook by Emelia Jackson. It's called Some of My Best Friends Are Cookies and it's got so many amazing recipes in it that I thought it might be fun to cook from the very first page through to the very last page and make every single recipe in this book. And I figured I would invite you along for the ride. So the very first recipe in this book is Scottish shortbread, and that's what we're going to be making today. Emelia's recipe needs to be refrigerated overnight or at least 1 to 2 hours. So first of all, I'm going to take you back to yesterday when I made the dough, and then we're going to bake up Emelia's recipes, and we're also going to make my grandmother's shortbread, which my family has been making for many, many years. And we'll do a bit of a taste test at the end and see which one we like better. So I'm going to take you back to yesterday while I make the dough, and I'm going to get my ingredients out for today's cooking. I've decided to make 3 versions of Emelia's shortbread. One version plain, one version coffee, and one version macadamia nut. So here I am just toasting my roughly chopped macadamias for a couple of minutes to get them nice and toasty brown, and then we will be making our 3 batches of shortbread. So we're starting with our plain shortbread here. So we're going to add 180 grams of salted butter and 90 grams of caster sugar to the KitchenAid, and we're going to mix that together until it's just combined and smooth. We don't want to cream it, we just want to mix it until it's combined. So then to our butter and sugar, we add 170 grams of plain flour, and again we mix that on a low speed until it is just combined. Now that this dough has come together really nicely, we are going to wrap that up in plastic wrap and put it in the fridge while we start our second batch. Our second batch is the macadamia shortbread, and the method for that is pretty much the same as the plain shortbread. First we add our butter and sugar to the mixer, cream that together until it is nice and smooth but not creamy. Then we add in our flour mixture and mix that together until it just is formed into a dough. And then after the dough is formed, we add in 100 grams of unsalted roasted macadamias and mix them through the dough. Once the macadamia dough is formed, we wrap that into a log shape in plastic wrap and pop that in the fridge, and move on to our third option, which is coffee shortbread. For the coffee shortbread, we add our butter and sugar, and then we add our coffee extract. Coffee extract is made by dissolving a tablespoon of instant coffee in 2 tablespoons of boiling water, and then just setting that aside to cool down. We beat our butter and sugar with the coffee extract until, again, it is just combined and smooth, and then we add our flour and combine that on a low speed until the dough forms. Once the dough is formed, again, we put that onto some plastic wrap it up nice and tight, and then we pop all 3 doughs into the fridge to cool overnight. My family has been making my grandmother's shortbread for many, many years, so I thought it would be fun to make a batch of her shortbread too and compare the two at the end. Shortbread only has a very few ingredients, so here we've got some butter that is salted butter, some caster sugar and some plain flour. It's important to use a butter that you like the flavour of, because that's going to be the main flavour of your shortbread. I've got a butter from New Zealand here today. My family quite likes it, so that's what we're going to use to make my grandmother's shortbread. My Gran's recipe and Emelia's recipe differ in a couple of important ways. My Gran's recipe does not follow the 1 part sugar, 2 parts butter, 3 parts flour ratio that is common with Scottish shortbread. And also my grandmother calls for the butter and the sugar to be creamed together really, really well. I'm only going to make a half batch of my Gran's recipe because it does make quite a lot of shortbread. The original recipe is in pounds and ounces because Australia converted to metric in 1966, and this recipe is older than that. So for a half batch, I have 142 grams of butter, and 57 grams of caster sugar. And we're going to beat those together until they are really creamy, and I'll be back in a few minutes to show you what that looks like. So you can see my butter's got really nice and pale, it's nice and fluffy, and it's really well creamed together. The next step is to add our flour. We've got 227 grams of flour in this bowl. And we're just going to beat that together until it's combined. So our shortbread is nice and combined now. So the next step is to lightly dust our surface with flour. And then we're going to shape this dough into a log that is about 2 inches by 1 inch. If you were doing the full batch, you would make 2 separate logs. But because I'm only making a half batch, I'm just going to make the one. So there's my log. Now I'm going to get a baking tray and I'm going to grease it. Of course you can use baking paper to do this, but my gran would always say that the reason her shortbread tasted amazing was because she'd used the same tray for 25 years. I'm just going to grab a knife and then we're going to chop up our shortbread. So we want our shortbread pieces to be about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 centimetre wide. And we're just going to chop down and then pop them straight onto our baking tray. So now that we've cut up all of our shortbread, I'm just going to prick each one with a fork a couple of times. So I've preheated my oven to 165 degrees, and these are going to go in the oven for about 20 minutes. And while those are cooking, I'm going to get Emelia's shortbread out of the fridge and we're going to chop those up and bake those too. So here we have our coffee shortbread, our macadamia shortbread, and our plain shortbread that have been in my fridge overnight. We're lightly flouring our surface also my rolling pin. And we want to roll out our shortbread to be about 1 centimetre thick. And because this is so cold, it will take me a little while, but that's okay. I have rolled out my dough to 1 centimetre thick. And you can see on my rolling pin, I have these guides that make sure that I'm doing exactly the right depth. And now we're just going to cut these into pieces. And prick them with a fork. So Emelia's shortbread needs to be baked at 130 degrees for 45 to 50 minutes. I have a gas oven which doesn't go that low, so I am going to cook these in my air fryer on the oven function. So I've just taken the first tray of Emelia's shortbread out of the oven, and while they are still hot, we're just going to sprinkle them with a little bit of caster sugar. And we let them cool on the tray for 10 minutes before we remove them to a cooling rack. Now, while I was rolling everything out, my grandmother's shortbread finished. And that is now nice and cool. You can see they're not too dark, a little bit brown on the bottom. Perfect, just the way my family likes them. And I have rolled out 1 tray of coffee shortbread. And I have cut the rounds of the macadamia shortbread. So those two will go into my air fryer oven after the second tray of plain shortbread comes out. I have just taken the macadamia shortbread out and sprinkled them with sugar. They need to cool in the pan for 10 minutes before I transfer them onto a cooling rack. The coffee shortbread is almost finished, and then the coffee shortbread needs to be dipped in milk chocolate, and the macadamia shortbread needs to have dark chocolate drizzled over the top. So 10 more minutes and we'll be about done. coffee shortbread looking gorgeous. It's got to rest on the tray for 10 minutes. But first we're going to sprinkle it with caster sugar while it's still warm. All of our shortbread is cooked and cooled, so now we are going to dip the coffee shortbread in melted milk chocolate, and we're going to drizzle the macadamia shortbread with melted dark chocolate. So I just got my milk melts here. And I'm just going to put these in the microwave to melt. Still got plenty of chocolate left, but for the macadamia ones we want dark chocolate. And then we're just going to drizzle this over the top. Alright, I'm going to let those set, and then I'm going to get my family to come in and we'll do a blind taste test. See you in a couple of minutes. Alright, so everything is finished, and I've got 2 of my family members here who are going to be blind taste testers for me. Well, the results from the blind taste test are in, and between the 2 plain shortbreads, we had 1 vote for my grandmother's shortbread, 1 vote for Emelia's shortbread, and 1 vote that said Emelia's shortbread is more of a traditional shortbread. However, my grandmother's was the favourite. So I think that concludes that both recipes are really nice. My grandmother's shortbread is a little bit less short, a little bit crispier, but they're both really delicious. However, when it came to the flavoured shortbreads, the macadamia nut shortbread was far and away the winner. That was everybody's favourite, between the macadamia and the coffee, and also between the macadamia, coffee and plain. I hope you will join me next week. Next week we'll be making recipe 2, which is chocolate chip cookies. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe if you'd like to follow along as we make the rest of the recipes in this book. I will pop another video here for you to enjoy between now and my next upload. Thanks for being here. I hope to see you next time. Bye.